just want that on the record. Yeah.
Send a picture to the capital review committee. Tell them we're gonna need a little extra.
Exactly. Yes, Stephen, where's this? Oh, I get it. The chair sits in the middle. He doesn't care about it.
I am going to call the meeting to order. Thank you, everyone. Meeting is called to order. We are being both recorded and broadcast live. May I get an approval of the agenda? Motion to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up for public comment. And I'm closing it for public comment. Thank you very much. Okay. So, Terry, did we have the minutes for January 21st and January 23rd?
No, you should have them for the 16th and 18th.
Yes, okay. So can I get a motion to adopt on the minutes for the 16th and the 18th? And a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, now here today is Campbell Sutton, who I had invited before and then it completely ignored her, which was not appropriate. So Campbell, you are here to discuss your citizens warrant article. And if you give me a second, I'll tell you what number it is now in the actual warrant. If someone gets there faster than me, that's also great. So if you please come forward, and then you have to speak at a microphone, please. Yeah, I'm gonna get there if you give me a second.
Thank you.
I've got it somewhere. My new little sheet.
Is it the one about capital projects?
It is, Libby. It's number 80, okay? And it used to be, also formerly known as I call it, II.
I know, are we gonna move on to numbers now?
Yes, we are. I had sent out a spreadsheet today that I created so we could track stuff. So I could track stuff at least. And I put both the number of the new, the new numbering system, and I put what it was as a citizens warrant article under formerly known as, kind of like Prince. So, okay. Thank you, Campbell.
Okay, so Campbell Sutton, 15 Appleton Road. There's a portion of this that's currently missing because when I reattached it to submit it, I had left off the top portion of it. So I'll read that because I think it helps put the rest of it in context, perhaps. So it starts, to see if the town will vote to petition the general court for a special act applicable to the town of Nantucket, with the general court being authorized to make non-substantive changes thereto, with the approval of the Nantucket Select Board to carry out the public policy objectives as follows. And then comes the writing that you have in front of you for the, so I'm still trying to figure out how to submit that portion to the warrant, but I think it has to go through the moderator or something like that. I think I have an extra copy. Do you want to see the copy with the... Denise, do you want to see the copy?
Yes,
with the...
please, Campbell, if you have it. Thank you.
I have one piece.
Okay, we can share. Okay.
So I think it's sort of self-explanatory. What might some questions be? I guess one might be, why did I put something like this together? I have been going to a town meeting for a long time. And it just seems like a lot of our interactions from the voters who show up that are part of the legislative branch of the town in our open town meeting form of government seem to be at odds with the direction that administrative forces want to go to or through. And from listening around for the last several years, I hear a lot of people getting quite upset that, they vote to reject something and it ends up coming up and they get it anyway and they don't understand and they're trying, and they're starting to drop out of the voting block, if you will. So fewer and fewer people find going to vote of value to them, right? Not that everyone has to win all the time, but it would be nice to know that your voice was being heard. So on several projects, one that came up in mind was the Our Island Home. Anyway, the goal is to, really my goal is to try and create more collaboration between the voters and administrators prior to a final decision, right? Like whether it was the national grid thing that they'd been working on for a year and a half, and then the voters are presented with, well, and here it is for you, but to try and get into the collaborative effort much earlier so that when projects are brought forward, they're brought forward in a way that would create greater support. There's always going to be people who aren't interested in whatever. I'm not trying to say everything has to be unanimous, but it seemed to me that capital projects where we have fairly large, like, you know, you have to sort of go for 2.5 override on some of these projects. Once they've been rejected twice, you know, because they're the same or substantially similar by town meeting or the ballot box, it would seem to me that the town shouldn't be able to bypass that you know, the vote of no, and just, you know, bypass town meeting altogether and find another branch, another avenue to fund something that people have already said that they're not interested in. It's one thing if what you hear and you do hear at town meeting, people get up and they tell you why they don't want something, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, you don't have to make up what it is. They're telling you point by point what it is that upsets them. So if all you're hearing is, well, you know, we don't want to pay for this, we don't want to pay for this, it's too much money, that kind of thing, then I can see bringing the same or substantially the same project forward with alternative funding, right? I could see trying to go for more funding. But when people are speaking of other issues that don't have to do with the funding of the project, but have more to do substantially with the design of the project, then I think it's important that, you know, when it's been rejected twice, so it's not like it comes up once and then everybody's no, and so you can't move forward. Of course, you adapt and try to bring something forward that would be acceptable the second time, right? So there's 2 opportunities there to make adjustments before coming back a third time. And that's what this addresses, is the third review of it.
Campbell, may I ask, do you have a specific example of something that was rejected twice?
Well, one of them, to a degree, would be the Old South Road improvements, which I believe in some form has come up. I mean, we'll get it in the form of, you know, do you approve for, you know, design ideas for a particular thing? But I think it came up with the, you know, they want to make it, put a passing lane or a turning lane down the middle and have some barrier, like some areas where you can cross through. And people have thought about that, and that's not something they're interested or a look that they're looking for, right? Not Sherburne Commons, but the Our Island Home, which is very important to all of us to understand. I think it came up once. People had a lot of responses to what they would prefer. Many people said from the outset that they were looking to have it stay on the property or within the vicinity of the property that it's currently on. And it came back again. I think it went from sort of maybe town-owned land by Sherburne Commons or something to further down on Myacomet Road, what I'd call, I think, Myacomet East, I think. You know, then it was decided that they needed to collaborate more with people, and so study groups have come up, et cetera. But I feel like that's one of those things where people were giving feedback, like sort of the legislative body is giving the executive body feedback on what they're sort of looking for, what kinds of things, parameters on things that they would approve. And that doesn't seem to get taken into consideration early enough. This is totally an aside, and I apologize. So yesterday early morning, I was listening to Firing Line, and Duval Patrick was on. I didn't know it at the time, but anyway. So he had made a statement that I thought was sort of interesting about how, you set a lofty goal, or, you have a big idea that you want to achieve, right? Well, there's not just one way to achieve that. So it's the creative collaborative process that gets you to that goal. And so I feel like that happens here a lot. We have a lot of big projects, as you guys well know, that are very expensive. And I think greater collaboration with the voters would help. We have a lot of engineers, we have a lot of designers, we have a lot of architects, we have a lot of builders, we have a lot of bright minds on the island that can contribute to problem solving. And I would just like to see more of that happening. We end up getting, like I said at the start, we end up getting end results that we're then allowed to give an opinion on, which of course, and I totally understand where everyone that had been working on it would be pretty ticked off that was, sort of the public's reaction. But it's because they're being presented with a final bit versus.
May I open it up to questions to FinCom, please, Campbell?
Sure.
So, Stephen?
So there's a few things that are being said that I don't necessarily agree with.
I'm sure.
Steve, could you make sure you're speaking into the mic?
Sure. So the first thing is about the electorate being presented with a finished product. Can you give me an example of where that's happened on a big project where there wasn't public input sought beforehand?
I thought I sort of did with the Our Island Home project, those two renditions of it. The Old South Road, I went to a number of the transportation meetings where you could give input, but you couldn't give input on the concept. You could only give input on what kind of plantings would you like to see. So you weren't really, it wasn't a dialogue about how we could solve a problem. It was, well, this is the solution. What are your comments about, what you would like to see in this solution?
So the Island Home, we'll just pick on that one because I'm not familiar with the public meetings on the other. But the Island Home was a years-long process that did have several citizen advisory boards, plus the Friends of the Island Home, plus...
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is when it gets to town meeting, there are people that are feeling like, because they're, in the end, they're the ones that approve or disapprove, right?
Agreed, and they, in the end, did not approve that project, which is appropriate and is the right of town meeting, and that's how the charter was set up, and that is appropriate. But there was lots of public input sought along the way. There was a public information campaign about the plan that the town thought was the best plan, and they looked for public input, and they tried to make their case about why it was the best plan, and ultimately it was voted down. I'm not sure if what you're suggesting is that a bunch of ideas should be presented at town meeting, and then within the course of a 4-hour meeting, we should hash out all those pluses and minuses of each of the options, and then we should make a decision based on that. Or I'm not sure what it is that you are proposing is a better solution than what we have today.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I just think that when it's, it's a process, right? So different people get up and make comment. And, I've sat there and take note of different comments. I don't think it becomes a deliberative thing right there, right? I mean, that
would be wildly inefficient.
Well,
that is not
it would
like
be, but I
what
think
I would.
what you're suggesting is that the town comes forward habitually with projects that even after all the public input is sought, even after the professional consultants that might necessarily be hired to assist in the production of plans or concepts for a particular project, even after all those things, it's not appropriate for the town to come up with a specific plan and ask for an up or down vote.
The third time, right? That's where we're with this, is the third time.
Okay, so let's get back to that portion of it. Which project has been disapproved twice? I mean, why the need for this article? When has it come up that this is necessary?
Well, most specifically, the one that had come up for me immediately when I was thinking about it in the spring was when there was the continued persistence on a roundabout at Bartlett and Surfside, which has been soundly rejected by many voters, and the transportation department was going to go around to get funding for that and thereby not require any approval by the voters, and we were going to end up with that whether we liked it or not. And I always think it's wonderful when you can get consultants, but I would like to see consultants at least referencing examples that reflect our particular environment, not just any town, any city, anywhere in the United States. And
Can I interject just for a moment, Cable?
yes, and actually, I don't want to get terribly carried away because I'm just
Well, I want to commend you because I think what you did last spring was proving that the system is working. The voters didn't like the roundabout. You offered an alternative, and I think people are happy with it. I don't think we're talking about doing that roundabout right now anymore, or for a while, I'm not sure. But I feel like what you did was innovative, and it worked. And so I feel like the system's working, which is why I was just surprised that you came forward with this article.
right, but it was because, in part, along with, the South Shore thing, and I'm glad people are starting to pull things out so that voters can vote more specifically instead of having to throw away a whole, baby in bathwater kind of thing. But anyway, while I did put that forward, that did not stop the process from moving forward. They were still going to do this. This was still being engaged by the transportation department.
Yeah, but you're
to
elected
have that.
leaders. You have elected leaders. Don Holgate's here today, and they listened to people who said, "Hey, the stop sign I think is working," and they've been listening. So that's really where I think the accountability
Right.
is, and that's the point I just wanted to make about it. I have a lot of respect for you. I have a lot of respect for what you did last spring, and I was one of the first ones to be like, "I don't want a stop sign there," but I do think it's working, and I think it's great, and I do think our elected leaders here who run the town, I think they've listened. So I feel like it's been a good system. It's a sometimes painful system, I know, and it seems like people are working behind your back. I can understand thinking that all these things are happening and, all of a sudden we're going to wake up and there's going to be a roundabout at the school or whatever. A lot of people are worried about that. But in this instance, I feel like what you did was exactly how the process should work, and I commend you for that.
Libby, you wanted to say something?
Just want to point out, we should just be factual about the examples. A roundabout has never been before the voters to construct a roundabout. What has been before the voters, which has been approved by the voters, is funding to acquire property to construct a roundabout. So I understand where Campbell is coming from in thinking that the stop sign article was, I guess maybe in some people's minds, was meant to cease any and all discussion, process, whatever about a roundabout, but that's not what that did. In in planning purposes. However, what it did do exactly is what Jill just said. The board took a lot of public comment into consideration. In fact, we had 2 public hearings about the stop signs to determine whether or not they should stay. And at both of them, we had about half people saying we don't like them and half saying we do like them. So the board eventually decided not to put forward anything to do with an old Bartlett Surfside roundabout in the foreseeable future, and rather focus on other transportation projects of importance. I'm not quite sure about the Island Home example. That came before town meeting. It was rejected at town meeting, and it did not proceed. In fact, what proceeded was a pretty lengthy study as to what would it take to construct a facility at the current site, which is what we heard feedback on. So I understand there's a perhaps a feeling here that people aren't paying attention to the voters or aren't listening or whatever, but we need to have factual examples. Not the items that I heard here are not exactly what happened.
Thank you. Brian, you wanted to say something?
I'd just like to, if I could, a little feedback on that. When the property was purchased, a roundabout was not stated as the purchase purpose. It was for potentially a right-hand turning lane off Bartlett onto Surfside, was what at least those of us had heard.
But the
So-
fact remains that it was never presented to the
I'm
town
just
that we ought
saying
to have a
that-
roundabout, and that was never voted down.
Okay.
So it's never been voted down. Is that right?
Yes,
That is
that's
right.
correct. Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one point about the way the article is written. The way it's written, it says that if the town found another funding source, it couldn't proceed with the project unless it went to town meeting. And okay, that would actually, I'm going to give you an example. If we had a project that was defeated twice and there was a benefactor that wanted to gift the money to the town to complete the project, it would prevent currently the way the law is written statutorily, once the select board approve the acceptance of a gift, we can expend that for its stated purpose. Under this article, if somebody wanted to be very generous and donate a large sum of money for a particular project because they felt very strongly about it, we would actually not be able to proceed based on that. And I don't know if it would
They
ever.
want that.
I think that's exactly the
They want
intent.
to block the project.
Sure, I'm just letting you know that if somebody wanted to donate the money so the town didn't have to expend one single dollar, we wouldn't be able to do it.
Speaking of that, when's Richmond's money coming through to finish their projects?
I think that they're paying. I'm not sure the way that grant agreement was written. I'd have to go back, but I thought they were paying the contractors directly, to my knowledge.
Okay.
That's non sequitur.
Any other questions? Any other questions for Campbell? Joe? No. Anything else from your side? Anything else? No? Okay. Thank you, Campbell.
So just to get to his point about a benefactor, because it would seem like in the example he just gave that the project would have been rejected twice by the voters and twice, right? So that's 2 years, maybe a year and a half, depending on special town meeting or not. And then going around the voters' desire, you'd have someone with money coming in and saying, here, let me help you have this thing that the voters have said they don't want.
They said they don't want to pay
when
for it, Campbell.
right,
It's
like
different
I
than saying
said,
they don't
it's-
want it. And my perfect example for this
Okay.
is the garage for the equipment that sits outside that's been rejected on last meeting. So we have expensive equipment sitting outside because the town voter doesn't want to spend $3 million on it. Now, if someone came along and said, I will pay you $3 million to put up a garage to keep your good equipment inside, I see no point in not accepting that gift to put expensive
Right, and
equipment
that
sitting
actually
outside.
has only been rejected once.
I know, but what I'm saying is,
Just trying to keep
Right,
1, 2,
nothing-
and 3.
right, I think we've established that nothing's
contained, but
been
that's
rejected
fine.
twice. Nothing has been rejected twice. So there's literally nothing that this would do right now. But the closest thing to it is the garage for apparatus for the public safety building. So that is the best example. And we don't know why people vote the way they do. Because a few people stand up and they say something, but we don't know why everyone else votes the way they do. So to say that if a project gets shut down twice is not for the fact that it cost the town money, that's a guess. It's a total guess.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, the island home is the case that proves the point, right? That was so complicated in terms of why people voted the way they did. Some didn't want to spend the money, some didn't want it moved, some wanted it closed, right? I don't know how you parse out from that.
And about 400 people made the decision for the town, well, 240, I think, made the decision in that
Right,
meeting.
12
they
made
show
the
that.
decision on the Rotary over here at Fairgrounds.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Campbell. Thank you for your time. And again, apologies for last time, and thank you for being flexible and coming back. Okay, Brian, over to you, my friend.
Thank you.
So, Brian, we did not get our island home budget.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that because I'm still finishing the review
Okay.
right now. So
Okay, thank you.
that's
So can we go through capital now? Is that
we.
what we're going to do?
Yes, absolutely.
Marvelous.
Did you get a copy of the report?
We did. We got a
Okay.
copy last Thursday, which was quite helpful.
Okay.
And for the committee, for the FinCom's benefit, I met with Stephen Welsh on Saturday. We spent about an hour and a half together going through how we are going to be so productively cooperative in future time. So, yes, it was very good. We had a good conversation. He was quite open. I was quite open.
Excuse me.
And, I acknowledge that according to the charter, they do not have to get a report to us until 30 days before. He says he's not going to stand on that. He would like to get it to us as soon as he can, but realistically, it will always be mid-January. I said, as long as we can do our planning and have productive discussions starting mid-January, as long as it can be before the budget process, so then that way we can ask the department heads about capital in more detail. That would work for us. So that was kind of the essence of our time together. So anyway, so thanks to all who have been involved in that, and let's go through the details now, Brian.
Talking 30 to 35.
Okay, so I think we may have talked a little bit about some of these very briefly, I think, anyway, but I'll go through all of them. So the recommendations for DPW, ADA facility upgrades, we've recommended the same 50,000 that was last year. And some of these I'm going to kind of lump together in the explanation because the explanation is all the same for all of them.
Okay?
Annual facility site paving upgrades, the DPW director had asked for 530,000. We recommended 250,000. General building envelope repair and maintenance, he had asked for 600,000. We're recommending 150,000, which the Capcom has agreed. Building space general renovations, DPW director had asked for the same 600,000. Town administration and Capcom recommended 150,000. Annual facility equipment repair and replacement, he had requested 150,000. We had recommended the 100,000. Facility bathroom replacements, he had requested 600,000. We recommended, Capcom agreed at 250,000. Lighting repair, they had asked for 200,000. We recommended the same 50,000 as the prior year. Utility systems, being HVAC, water, sewer, drainage, request was 600,000. Recommendation of 150,000.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Are there cases in here where administration's position and Capcom's differ? Because I was confused by this, because we don't have yours, we just have the request.
The recommendation from Capcom does not differ, with the exception of, I think, two that I'll highlight. Okay?
And Brian, just while you're going through that, lack of information and capacity is the comment of note. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I think that in the discussions, it's more of the capacity than it is lack of information. We've been
Capacity to execute.
So in all of the facilities, okay, we settled on the recommendation collectively that we would recommend the same as the prior year because right now we are looking for the deputy director for facilities, and there's two capital cycles already funded, and they're working to identify how to deploy that money. So the theory was that we would recommend additional money to continue to build up the available funding to be able to complete projects, but getting to the requested level right now was going to be difficult given the capacity discussion that had been going on. So that's why we had recommended in discussion with Capcom in doing it that way, and they did agree with that recommendation after talking with the DPW director about the facilities, and he understood and is in agreement with doing that right now.
Okay.
And I think some of that also, if you look in town administration, we have a recommendation for a facilities-wide master plan. And before allocating the large sums that have been asked for, we want to undertake that to get a better idea of what we need to do before moving in that direction. So it's kind of the recommendation was really a joint discussion and a joint agreement on how best to proceed right now.
And I apologize if I should
Yeah.
have picked this up in the text in here.
That's
but
okay.
Process-wise, does Capcom start with the request and administration sort of take on the request? Or are they starting with the request and they're doing their process, and then you're telling them where you guys think it should be kind of at the end? Do you understand the distinction?
I do understand the distinction, and I think it's the town manager, I'm sure, hopefully will jump in case I don't think I'll make a mistake, but I'll do the best I can. All of the recommendations are put into the software and presented to Capcom. At the same time as they're going through discussions with departments, we've already had meetings with the departments, and we're working on finalizing based on some of our recommendations ultimately depend on what the funding available is. So it's kind of a dual track process as we move through it.
It's kind of happening at the same time, but
They-
Capcom's kind of informed by where you guys are getting to.
Yes, and they're informed. We give them updates on where we are. We're making the same Rory rankings that they do to try to get to the same points and look at them as well. We do the same Rory process as they do. And if there's wide discrepancies between the two, we have a discussion on how to get to somewhere.
In the perfect world, if you had the time, would you have them start with your recommendation?
Sure. Thank you.
I mean, yes and no. It can go both ways, because I've worked in environments where the department heads come up with their wish list, and then the administration above us says, nice try, go back
Right.
and try this again. So, yeah,
That's-
so it can go both ways. I've
Yeah,
seen
that
it.
is kind of the way we try to work it. Every now and then a project comes up later that somehow wasn't known before. And that can be a wide range of things. It can be something, oh, we forgot this, or, oh, we just found out by some state agency we need to replace XYZ. Or it could be something like the senior center that came up after the process, or some project like that that has different sorts of support behind it. But it's generally administration's practice not to put forward items that we have already told the department we're not putting that forward. Occasionally Capcom beats it out of the department and tries to get them to submit it, but it doesn't usually get too far.
Thank you, Libby. Okay, Brian. Back over to you.
So next would be, and as you'll see down below in the last one of facilities is the 300, it's actually 346, but for rounding, the facilities master plan. So in their general stormwater TV work, which is continuation of the stormwater, the CCTV work that they've been doing, it's $266,000 is the ultimate recommendation. All of the vehicles, with the exception of the admin vehicle and the fleet service utility body truck, town administration did recommend, and Capcom, based on their procedures, ultimately came to those recommendations. The electric admin vehicle and the fleet service vehicle did not rank in the Rory calculations on the Capcom side as high, so they suggested that they may want to come back with more information to potentially see in a future year if it rose high enough on the ranking request to be funded. And they did make the request to the DPW director that they move the vehicle to operations.
Okay.
Transportation, cobblestone improvements. We've historically been funding this at $250,000, and that was the recommendation, and Capcom did ultimately agree with that recommendation. The same with multi-use paths. We recommended $250,000, and they did ultimately agree with that as well. Newtown Road, which you know is one of the standalone debt exclusion articles for $1,154,000, was recommended by both, requested by transportation and recommended by administration and Capcom.
Now, not more speed tables.
Ultimately, I think there'll be a different design there, but I believe, correct? Or they're going to alter them somehow, but I don't know exactly how. More, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, you're running out of spots to put them.
I think those are kind of temporary, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
they are?
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
okay.
just their stuff.
I thought they were.
So the permanent traffic data collection, last year we had allocated $75,000 These are really some innovative ways that transportation is going to collect data on the amount of cars on the various roads.
Yeah.
We actually engineered and had an engineering firm help us design it, and the actual estimate for all of the work that needs to be done and the actual purchase of the collection, the data collecting system itself, is that they're $150,000. So this year's budget contains $116,000 in supplemental funding because we use some of it for engineering, and then in future years it will have additional money to be able to utilize that design at other roads that the transportation planner and everyone deems necessary or a valuable source to collect
How many
data from.
locations, Brian?
I think that we have at least 3 more years of these, of the 150 in, so at least 3 at this point.
No, how many locations, I'm sorry. how
Oh,
many
this one right
locations do you
here would
think
be one.
monitored?
Just one. Yeah. So the first one is at, Libby, is it Consu Springs? Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. So the first one is going to be going there, and then they'll work on where the other ones will go in
And it's just
subsequent years.
automobiles, doesn't count bicycles and pedestrians.
It can tell the difference between a car and a truck
Yes.
Yeah.
and the size of the truck.
And a person pushing a stroller was an example.
Yes.
Although I don't know what you'd be doing there. What are we doing with it? The data.
Is this part of this traffic study or something?
Yeah, I think it's part of the strategic plan on vehicles that the transportation planner's been working on.
Feed data into a different study about traffic modeling downstream. So, for example, if we put the roundabout,
You did not just say roundabout.
Don't say.
Stop sign somewhere.
milestone rotary, or what impact would that have downstream? And also, towards the board's goal of reducing auto dependency by 6%, how do we measure that?
But how many of the units, counters, do you need before it becomes something that you can utilize the information?
I guess the answer to that they think is 1, because we're starting with 1.
Well, the one, there's one in for 21, but there was one approved in 20.
Right, this is supplemental funding for that one.
Where's
Yeah.
the first one?
Actually, Brian, I think the first one is the Consu. I'm
Right.
not quite sure what the second one is.
Well, this funding is supplemental for Consu because they use part of it for engineering and designing the systems. So the subsequent years will have additional counters in them to do this.
Gotcha. So this will still get us just this Consu. And
Yeah.
is the police department covering any of the engineering costs or the installation costs? Because they're also putting their cameras on there.
Yeah, it's all being funded by the capital articles. We don't allocate it directly to departments.
Okay.
Just one last thing. How much does the counter cost?
The number I saw was everything all in, so I don't have a break. I didn't get the breakdown. I got the estimate from the engineer that it was $150,000 for the system that they designed to be able to put in. If you want to,
Include the software? And,
yes,
okay.
yep, it includes everything to actually get it to work and locate it. Road improvements. The DPW director has every year asked for $3.65 million based on the beta report. Every year we have agreed and funded $1 million, partially due to the capacity of having only one paving contractor on the island. So, Sconset footbridge, we had 2 years ago when we had a couple issues with the footbridge and we had an engineer come out and review it. They also prepared a report on what needed to be done. So the DPW director was asked for, and we've recommended jointly with Capcom the $100,000 to make the repairs based on the report from Vertex. Most of you, or some, or not, if not all of you, will recall that a few years ago we started a sidewalk improvement plan, and the first 2 years we allocated $1.5 million. Then we skipped a year, and then we allocated another $1 million last year. This is the fourth year of the allocation to continue the plan as been outlined and continue moving that process forward. Surfside Area Road, Phase 2, Lovers Lane roadway improvements. This was originally put in at $6.5 million, which would have done Orkwa, Monahans, and the entirety of the area. Based on DPW discussions and presentations to not only town admin but Capcom, the recommendation was to actually split that into a multi-phase, so at least a 2-year process. The most pressing part that the DPW director recommended doing in discussion to Capcom was doing Lover's Lane roadway area, which is about half of the 12,000 linear feet that would be reconstructed. And when we did the calculation, it comes to $3.27 million. So we've split that at least into this year and next year being the funding for the remaining portion of that area. Waite Drive, which is also 6FG, which is where the workplace housing, and Amelia Drive. This is supplemental funding. If you recall, we've already allocated just about $2.5 million to this project. They've subsequently got an engineering review back and says that in all we need $6.4 million, and this 3.7 will close that gap to do all of the roadway and infrastructure improvements in those areas. Fire department ALS equipment, $100,000. This will actually come out of the ambulance reserve fund.
Sorry, can I ask
Yeah,
a quick question
sure.
on this one?
Yep.
That's 6 something, that's all infrastructure improvement, that doesn't include the 900,000 or whatever for the lot, right?
No, that's infrastructure, building the roadway and everything. So. ALS equipment, this will come out of the ambulance reserve fund, $100,000 for now that we have actual paramedics and we're working on getting the program up and running and licensed. We need to make upgrades to the equipment in the ambulance to have them be advanced, to be able to perform advanced life support capabilities.
Brian, how many ambulances do we have?
Oh, 4.
Thank you.
Self-contained breathing apparatuses, SCBAs. This is the third of a 4-year process of updating those, and in doing that, it's just under, it's right around $100,000. Year 4 or year 3 of that project, we'll see the fourth and final year in this, not only in Capcom but in the funding recommendations next year. Trench rescue, $220,000 was the request. Internally, we had some discussions about it. Capcom ultimately said that it's a great idea, but we'd really like to understand the policies and the protocol and where you're going to put all of this really expensive equipment when it's not in use. So they discussed it with the chief, and he said that he could bring it back and have further discussion next year on that.
So is this, for example, when we had to dig up, was it C Street? I can't remember what we had to dig up the year we had the big storm.
Mm-hmm.
Is this, somebody's down there, they're stuck in the trench, we have to save them?
Yes.
Okay.
Just gonna let them stay now.
No, I wanted to make
get
sure
you
what.
next year.
No,
I
we
wanted
would
to make
not
sure I
want
knew
them to
what
stay there,
trench
but yes.
rescue was.
Yep.
Yeah,
So-
okay.
And I think that Capcom was generally supportive, but there was some stuff that needed to be worked out, and they said they'd like to see it come back next year with some more information. So,
Thank you.
IT network infrastructure, $100,000. This is for maintaining the switches and servers and other pieces of the network that the backbone of the operations of the town. $60,000 for replacement of town computers on the annual cycle that they have to do between printers and desktops and laptops. And then virtualization is something that we undertook last year. There was $180,000 allocated to be able to virtualize our network, which will give us faster recovery times and better redundancies in terms of operation. And there's still continuation of that and some support that's necessary. And it's about $75,000 over the course of the next 12 months. But I can tell you that the process has been going along very smoothly, and it's been a really great thing, that the transition to the virtualization. Marine Department pump out boat replacement. It's not actually, it's an addition to the fleet. The chief has made had presentation to the Capcom and discussions with town administration that there is a need for a second pump out boat in the harbor, and so they've recommended the $150,000.
He also brought it up during our budget review.
Right,
We
yes.
discussed it
Yep.
there as well.
So the design and construction of the new island home, this was actually $5 million in there, which we have moved out into a special at the earliest, correct, Libby? I don't know why he has $500,000, although we are,
No, it's $500,000.
Okay.
It was initially 5 for design. and,
Okay.
Board had a lot of discussion about this and
okay, you're right.
determined we're not ready for that right now, but we would like to use $500,000 to supplement the remainder of the $1 million approved in
17 or 16? Yeah, okay, yep.
to continue looking at alternate operational models of a facility.
Is this still with the same people that were on the working group, so LWDA
I'm not
and,
sure if it will be them or not.
Okay.
It might be other consultants that talk about operational.
okay,
And the reason that it has nothing there is because it was one that came after they had already gone through their process, but I think they are generally supportive when we discussed it with them.
So it's gonna be in here, or it's gonna be a separate?
It's going to be, actually, it will be in the article. It will be in the article, in the motion.
okay,
Loran Housing Sewer, this is to connect the facility to the town sewer. It is in the sewer district, so in the ask was for $500,000, and they recommended that $500,000. Public Safety Auxiliary Building, the request was $3 million. Town administration and Capcom agreed that we were not going to put that forth at this point this year, given the amount of current projects that we're going to be asking for debt exclusions and whatnot. So that is something that will potentially come forward at a future date.
you're gonna go out and get a donation for this after I mentioned it, right, Brian?
From you.
Yeah, sure.
Well, you never know, and somebody could want to donate money for a project that they support. So
$3 million for essentially a storage shed, a large one, I assume. Just seems like a lot of money.
if you saw what the bids came for, you would understand that it was over $4 million at one point.
How big is it?
Pretty big.
Pretty big.
Yeah, it will store equipment. They'll be able to do some mechanical work on it.
Big enough.
And it has to be, and it has to be heated too. So it is, I don't know the exact dimensions off the top of my head, but it came back very, very expensive. Higher than the engineers and OPM and everybody ever expected it would. So that's why it was delayed, and we asked for supplemental funding, which wasn't approved, and it was in there this year, but Capcom suggested based on everything else, and we had talked about it internally then. I think the board actually also mentioned that they thought it might be better to wait until the special or to the next annual to do it. So that's why it's out of the recommendation. School department asked for a replacement Bobcat for $65,000, which the Capcom did recommend. I think they also may have talked to you about their campus-wide improvement plan, which is asking for $750,000 a year, which both Capcom and town administration recommended funding.
Can you explain that? I'm guilty of asking the superintendent about that, and then he answered, and I went, okay, great, thanks. And I actually still didn't understand. Why does that make sense?
And you expect me to do a better job?
Yeah, did you hear that?
Thank you.
Were
I
you here when
appreciate
the
it.
school was here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like I was like, Brian, what does that mean? Why does that, what am I missing there? Why does that make sense as a? You don't know what I'm missing. That's fair.
No, I don't. I think that it's an approach for them that allows them to not have to ask for $3 or $4 million every year as they do the master plan. Having the money allocated would allow them to begin the process.
It's moving fields, things like
And
that.
because
even though-
because
I
of
understand
the
what it's for. I just,
Right.
that mechanism is a little different to me than, say, having a plan and you guys coming for a debt exclusion or whatever to fund that plan. This notion of give us $750 a year and check back with us.
I mean,
I'm struggling a little bit with
I
that.
can
Like,
understand what you. I can understand that, but it's conceptually it's kind of like coming in and asking for $3 million to design a building, and then designing it, and then going and asking for the ability to build the building. I think what they're looking at realistically is the fact that as the master plan's developed, if they have the another $750, they can go out and procure the architects to start the process of developing the plans that are within the master plan itself.
So I guess what I'm okay, fair enough. I guess what I'm caught up in is the plan is to request $750 each year. It would seem to be much like the way you're approaching the Island Home, right? You'd sort of have a number to request this year, and then you'd sort of figure out where. I guess that's the part that was confusing to me, the notion that there was this lockstep plan. Of
Well, I think that they have a
$750.
general idea that it may cost, just for discussion's sake, $3 million, and they had the start of the master plan, and they asked for another $750 this year. And as they progress, that would get engineering, and it may get smaller projects started within it, and then they can continue to move forward. So it would be akin to asking for the $500,000 and waiting for that to be done, and then waiting a couple years to ask for the whole thing. I think this gives them the time or the ability to start the design process and other processes necessary that do have funding
Yeah, I
sources
guess it's just
attached.
the expectation
Yeah.
that they need 750 each year, as opposed to they need 500 to get started.
Mm-hmm.
Next year they're going to take a look and they need $1.5 million to get done. You know, the 750 a year seems like kind of, and maybe it won't be there next year. It just says it's a plan. So okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that until they know they need that amount every year, they should have just left that sentence off, to be
I
honest.
think that sentence
Yes,
just confused
exactly.
me, 'cause it felt like debt or something. You know,
Yeah.
it felt,
Yeah, I agree. Because next year they might need $1 million to do what they need to do.
I would think.
They also had a request for 150,000 in for servers and equipment related to network infrastructure and the backbone of their operations, which we did fund, and Capcom agreed at the $150,000 level. The boiler replacement, they recommended in the capital plan the $300,000, and Capcom and town administration agreed on the $300,000 for that request. And then this is kind of the article, much like we do in facilities, $300,000 to building renovations and improvements. They have a list various across the spectrum, and we agreed with the recommendation, and they have been getting that allocation every couple of years to continue the progress of maintaining the infrastructure that they have. Town administration, we requested $3.3 million for Children's Beach stormwater pump, which is part of the hazard mitigation and at least hazard mitigation plan. Capcom recommended the $3.3 million for that project.
Brian, and maybe Libby also for you, does this have to do with the complaints that I'm hearing from clients in the Brant Point area? Yeah. Okay. So this,
Stinky water.
It's in town admin, which I think we might have actually briefly broached with you, is because
the resilience
we are working on and we are going to in future years break out hazard mitigation into its own department, and coastal resiliency and any of those other initiatives will become their own department so that they're readily identifiable within, versus having them stuck in town administration. But since that hasn't been done and this came in, that's going to be broken out so people can identify it.
But can I just add a little bit? This number is coming out of a modeling study that is underway now for the Brant Point area, the Westchester Street area, and maybe North Liberty-ish area, Lily Pond. This pump station is expected to hopefully help pump the stormwater from that entire area. So the modeling study is not complete yet, but the engineer, we told him we need a number because we told some people in Brant Point that we were trying to work on this as quickly as possible. So this is the number that we got. And he said this is hopefully worst case scenario.
smaller pump and
Isn't this a good example of somebody giving a donation maybe to replace this? Wasn't this?
I think the next
no.
one on here is going to be one
That was, yeah, Fulling Mill.
Oh yeah, well that's
Fulling-
for the road. But I thought that there were some people that lived in Brant Point that were willing to give some money for this.
I have not gotten any money
Okay,
for this
sorry.
or any indication that the people are ready to give money.
they were willing to spend money, but it was on attorneys. It wasn't for pumps.
But they can always come down and we'd be happy to accept a check.
You mean you would meet with him? That'd be
Absolutely.
I think if we could have this pump upgraded tomorrow, literally tomorrow, we
Yeah.
might get some money. But they didn't
Right.
have the time.
You're talking about a lot of money?
3.3
$3
million.
million.
No, the contribution.
I never got it.
Oh, okay.
It was never a contribution.
Fulling Mill Road, the request which is also out of the hazard mitigation plan, was put in the beginning is $700,000, but it's our understanding that there's already been design and engineering work that procured or begun an effort undertaken by a citizen who is going to gift that work to the town so that we can proceed to the next step. So that's why the request was originally in here, and the recommendation from Capcom and the recommendation from town administration was to remove that based on that information.
Where is that?
It's out by the Shipwreck Museum.
Okay, thank you. Because Jill is our resident FinCom. I will go out and explore and come back and report
No,
to
but
you.
one of the most beautiful houses on the island is on Fulling Mill. A few of them are actually, so I'm very partial to it.
So then the next one was listed as a supplemental request for the Harbor Master Building in Town Pier. In discussion with the deputy chief who is working on both of those projects, that money, which was for the design and installation of a wave attenuator can actually be absorbed and fit into the existing appropriation, so we didn't need the extra money.
Okay, what is a wave attenuator? I don't know.
A wall.
Oh, that's a wall?
It would be an extension that would deflect the force of the waves away from the pier. It's
Okay.
basically a big wall, may be the best description, but it would take the energy from the waves and deflect it away from the pier.
Okay,
So, but we can fit that within the existing appropriation, so we don't need the supplemental funding for it. Island-wide underground wiring feasibility study. Request was for $500,000 based on a discussion with an engineer who gave us that number. Discussion with Capcom and town administration, the recommendation was for $500,000 to do that project. Townwide document management system, $250,000 in the capital plan. The recommendation was for $250,000, and that is a continuation of the electronic document management system that we've already started, which is quite labor intensive in scanning and getting the documents in a easily searchable format and off of paper, so that it's better serve the public when we're looking for documents. So this is a continuation of the project that we've already started, and will continue on for a long time because there's some very large departments that we have to eventually get to.
Can I just interrupt to say thank you to Ally for getting us this room, because I've seen a lot of people coming in for other meetings. I very much prefer being here, so you must have been quick on the draw. Thank you.
Everything was reserved at the beginning of the summer.
Nice.
and everyone comes in and goes, "Huh,"
Yeah.
and turns around and goes out again. I don't understand that, because I think this is the place to be personally, but clearly not the 7 people who walked in and turned around and walked right back out.
We need popcorn.
And then the last one, or pastries or some type of sugar, right?
No.
Then the last one on the general fund side was the townwide security measures. This is for assessment of the security measures within the municipal office buildings and recommendations and hopefully implementation of some of those. As noted here, we have spent about $34,000 over the last few years, with turning all the buildings into key card access. And so we asked for $100,000, and Capcom did agree with town administration's request and recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Enterprise funds?
Yep. Now, in the airport, we did ask questions of Noah when he was here. Does everyone still want Brian to go through the airport capital projects? Because we were able to ask Noah, but we can just let Brian
I
continue.
guess just the one general question about the reimbursement, the availability of reimbursement funds for some of these larger projects. It sounded like that was somewhat in question, more than it has been in previous years.
You probably are more than likely referring to the AIP project for the security updates.
Yep.
And I think that the airport has been working very closely with the FAA because there's certain pieces that they'll reimburse at larger amounts than other. Design may be a lesser amount than construction, and so on and so forth. As is with every borrowing with grant expectations that we authorize for the airport, okay? They don't really even begin proceeding with the remainder or the borrowing or until there's an absolute understanding of what their exposure or what their ultimate number is going to be. They do have an initial funding for the beginning phase of this with an understanding of what the FAA is generally going to be reimbursing them for that. They've been in negotiations with the expansion of the project because a lot of that, part of it was due to cost of doing business on Nantucket and the contractors that bid on the project, but some of it, I believe, is my understanding, was changes in what the FAA was looking for in terms of the security project. So they've been working with them to leverage as much reimbursement as they can. I don't have a specific dollar or percentage reimbursement on that, but I think that has many components to it. That's why there's differing levels of reimbursement, because it's not such a straightforward project as repaving the runway. So before they proceed farther along, once they get the authorization, we will have an understanding of what the airport's actual commitment will ultimately be at the end of the project.
And what latitude does the airport have to set new landing fees or desk fees or whatever it is that are their discretionary fees that the FAA won't say, that's too much. That you've gone beyond.
That is a question for the airport.
Okay.
I don't know the breadth of their discretion and how high they can raise fees. I'm sure there's some rules on how to do it that I'm not entirely
it's
familiar
always
with.
something that they bring up, that they have to discuss with FAA what they're going to charge people to land here. But if a greater percentage of the cost for these necessary improvements for the weight of the new aircraft falls on us, it'd be nice if we could recoup that at the very least.
And we can ask them if they can give us a general overview of what the rules are from the FAA, and I can provide that to you to give you an answer.
I mean, not important maybe for right now, but if this continues to be a complicated issue in the future.
Sure.
Because it's always been very nice where they say 95% of that money's coming back to us, and we sort of just, okay, whatever, spend whatever you want. But if that's not going to be the case going forward.
Sure.
I'm sure we never said spend whatever you want,
Well,
Stephen.
at 5% of, you know, $6 million is like the high figure. You know, we'd see like $1 million,
Yeah,
$2 million,
yeah.
but we're only spending
Absolutely.
5%. You're like, that sounds good. I'd like
Sounds
new,
good,
new
exactly.
pavement. Yeah.
Okay, by me, yeah.
Wait, can I ask about the groundwater and soil investigation? Like,
You can.
what do you know about it?
I know that they have an article in here to do groundwater and soil investigation.
That's a lot of money. What is it?
They've been notified that they have to do some groundwater sampling and testing.
Yeah. So okay.
So that's the estimate that they've got from their consultants on what it's going to cost to do.
Yeah. So they must be testing for PFAS because it's expensive. Okay. Thanks.
For what?
PFAS.
What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Teflon.
No.
They have a lot of that and stuff. Maybe they might not. You don't know. But it's very expensive to test.
Yeah. Excuse me. Our island home. There were two projects, and in discussion with not only representatives from Island Home, Capcom, we determined that if they were needing to be moved forward, that we could possibly find money in some of the building articles that they have, or depending on the cost, they may be able to take it out of professional services in their budget to move forward with them. So that's the reason for the no recommendation from Capcom at this time. Did the sewer director go through the projects with you? I can't remember, Madam Chair.
I would say yes, but as there are so many, and, you know, it is our largest
Sure.
chunk of capital, it
Okay.
probably, thank you, Brian, for continuing to elaborate on them for us.
We talked a lot about those things that the special crane has to put in
The membranes?
yeah,
The
we talked
membranes.
about
He spent a lot of
Yes,
time on that.
We did spend a lot of time on the membranes.
Okay.
So he did go through actually each one,
Okay.
but,
Do any jump out with questions, or do you want me to go through every one of them individually, or?
Oh, I was a little bit curious about, and maybe I didn't read it carefully enough, the one that's called South Valley Pump Station Upgrades. And it's 850,000. In the text, it talks about Richmond Properties was supposed to pay 250,000. So is the project 1.1 million, or is the 850 what we're going to expend, and we might get 250 back from Richmond?
It's actually 1.1 million. The 250 was expended on design and other work, and
this is supplemental?
yeah, this is
Sort of
yes,
supplemental,
yep. Okay, I'll go back to the beginning. Baxter Road. This is, as he noted in here, this is for the relocation of the utilities in that short roadway in the event that we have to relocate them immediately. Discussion about recoupment of the money will be at a point when we get to there, but we need to have funding authorized and available in the event that we have to move very quickly to relocate them. Airport Road Pump Station is $1 million. This, as he says, is an upgrade to a 30-year-old pump station, and it brings it to current standards and sizing for the sewer capacity in that area. We're working the final estimates for Aurora Way. He asked for 60,000. We're working with Weston and Sampson on the master plan, so that will include some additional information necessary to begin that process. And David feels comfortable that we can start with the 60,000 and begin the process of upgrading that pump station. Replace the F-550 dump truck. the Capcom did recommend the 130,000 for that. It was resubmitted. It was not approved. It did not rank high enough in the Rorys last year, and David did resubmit it and discussed with them the need to replace the vehicle, and they felt comfortable this year doing that. Sewer design and construction in Sconset, 350,000. This has been kind of a long-standing discussion. We're doing a CWMP in that area, and it's the sewer director's belief that we're going to have to start the planning for the design and update to the sewer system in that area, which is why it's listed as phase 1.
Only 106 years old.
Gravity. Just
That's
gravity,
good, right?
Gravity. Is there any work on that with the development that's going on there? Was that-
I think the sewer director has had some discussions with them, and I think
Yeah,
it's
because
still
it's a lot to come
yeah.
online in time,
Yeah.
and I didn't know if they were going to help. They're abutters, I think. Some of
There's
the
been
lots.
discussions. I don't know exactly where that is, but with any of this, we still have to begin to be able to plan it and then continue those discussions. So, South Shore Road, which I do believe we may have discussed, but is for the design and construction of a gravity sewer and pumping station to meet future flows in that area and serve needs areas. We just discussed South Valley. Surfside Road area improvement, he has listed as phase 1. We have allocated at last year's town meeting $5.6 million. We have a design contract for that. And when the design firm, which is Weston and Sampson, based on the design, they decided that we needed to add a pump station in that design. This is downstream capacity based on the new sewer system. We undertook a downstream capacity analysis from an update to the original and determined that we needed to make updates along Surfside all the way down to the sewer treatment plant. So we had asked for 5.6 million. The new estimate is just under 7.6 million. We have authorization for $7 million SRF borrowing for this project. So this would be getting a maximum of up to 2% and the interest rate through the state revolving fund. So
This isn't the new third sewer
No.
main that's supposed to come from downtown and.
No, this is not that.
back up
So-
to the existing ones.
No, so at last year's town meeting, there was $2.5 million allocated for the design of the third force main. We have an OPM, Hazen and Sawyer. We just finished interviewing the 3 firms that submitted for it. There's a recommendation on who the highest rated firm is, and we are currently in the process of negotiating the design fee through bid documents for that. So that's a separate project that's not included. We will be asking for funding for that at a different once we're to that.
And it's not, and if I'm reading correctly, it's not in the 10-year forecast either.
The
The third force main, it's not.
is it in it? I'd have to look if it's. I thought it might have been in an old version. It should have been in an older version, which was rolled.
$6 million.
I just was curious about whether, if maybe when I don't know, the titles aren't clear, but I was looking for the third force main project on this 10-year forecast thing, and I didn't see it.
I don't see it either. No, just South Shore Road sewer.
I gotta look at it because I know it is in one of them, or it was on one of them, so. I'll double check that and I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Great.
The membranes, as we discussed, the cranes and everything else that David needs to do to replace those and update those. Upgrade wastewater lab, we recommended the 125,000, which I think he did discuss as well.
You did.
Okay, solid waste, 470,000 for renovations, renovations and facility renovations at the MRF. And then a new sorting station and conveyors for 590,000. I will note that those are actually being funded through raise and appropriate.
Okay.
Is the funding source, and which is noted in the book here, or in the Capcom report. And the only water company project between Sconset and Wanacommet is continuation of the water main replacements for $1.1 million, which was recommended by Capcom and town administration. And then in the appendix, we go through everything and we break down all the funding sources that we propose and how we propose to fund all of the recommended projects.
And the debt exclusions and the capital exclusions are voted on the ballot on the 14th of April. Is that correct?
They're voted at the election, yes. Yep.
That's the 14th. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And Brian, if you're going to sort of do a little checking on the 10-year spreadsheet, there were a couple of other numbers under DPW, the Surfside area roads reconstruction and the Waite Drive, Amelia Drive. Maybe there's another column that's been dropped off or something because the totals look bigger than the.
That's the total. It previously appropriated stuff is not highlighted in that 10 years. That's how you're getting to the additional numbers.
Understood.
Good. Any other questions for Brian on capital? No? Okay. Brian, thank you very much on that. Now, as you saw when I apologize for sending out an email this today and then acting as if you've all just dropped everything and read it. So I'm wondering, on the warrant, Brian and Libby, I see we have, the first 27 are appropriations, but some of them don't have numbers in them, so we can't really.
None of them are gonna have numbers in them, those are all going to motion.
Okay,
And some of that, I thought you guys reviewed at the budget thing.
some of them we did, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if we could go through them now and make a motion now on them to try to move along, because as I pointed out, we have 12 of 117 done. And we're running.
When's the next meeting?
Tomorrow,
After that?
Thursday.
No, well, Wednesday joint was selected.
Wednesday the joint, but we wouldn't be ruling on anything on Wednesday.
I think our normal process here is that over the next couple of weeks, we will be giving you these numbers very
Okay.
specifically.
Okay.
Do you want to quickly go through this, Warren?
Sure.
Would that be helpful? I don't want to take you through something you don't really want to.
I think maybe we should just try to get rid of some citizen warrant articles. I don't know.
Instead, okay.
Unless if you really want to do that. No.
I'd be happy to.
She's quite good at it. She does it in
I've
like
seen you
5
do it-
minutes.
I've seen you do it on TV a couple
Yeah, I've
of
seen her
times.
do. I've seen you do it on TV a couple times for like 5 minutes. It's excellent. So, okay, let's go to. In which case, I have got in front of me. All right, Article number 34, the Ambulance Transport Fund. The idea is to invite Mr. Weiner back after we have the CRC report on February 11th.
And the idea is that you want to know what the CRC might be recommending for its appropriation to the hospital for other services. Okay. I can give you an update on that. And
In which case, we could go through it now, if everybody's up to going through it now.
yeah, there's a number that we've decided, the CRC has decided this is the appropriate amount of money we'd like to allocate to the hospital. But let's find out what the hospital is willing to give us for that amount of money. They've requested $343,000. The amount of money that we're talking about appropriating is approximately half of that, a little less than half of that. So we want to know, and we're scheduling a meeting for Wednesday morning. Dorothy Hertz is the chair of the CRC. She and I are going to go, along with Taylor Hiltz is going to come with us. And we're going to find out, for this amount of money that we have available, what can we get of the original offered services? And based on that, we'll either confirm that that's the amount of money that we're going to recommend to the Finance Committee that we want to allocate, or we're going to have to make some adjustments if we find that the hospital is going to cut too deeply or whatever. There might be some adjustments to that figure, but it's going to be roughly half of what they've asked for. So.
Okay?
So maybe that gives us enough to talk about, or maybe you want to wait until
No,
after?
I'm open either way. I just originally the idea was that we'd look at the whole Health and Human Services like items
Right.
together. So, but we can go ahead and discuss it today. I mean, we know that they came in at 150, and that in the request, and that they have found.
You discussing the ambulance transport?
Yes.
So I'm gonna recuse myself.
Okay. Please. All right.
And
Thank you.
although I'm happy to speak to it, if anybody wants.
You can speak to it as a member of
As
the
a-
public,
as a
because we're all,
representative of the hospital, I'm happy to answer any questions.
we're always excited to have a member of the public here.
I'm gonna go to
Chris.
another meeting.
Everybody's running to planning. Sad. It's just sad. So, okay. As you know, it's been requested that for 150, they found $40,000 in other funding. So any motion that we would make, if we were to adopt it, would change the number. We would then say motion to adopt at 110 as an example.
Right.
And last year, when we ruled on this as FinCom or made a recommendation, we recommended that we would fund it and that we would then, but it was one and done, basically. You need to find funding for next year. And the biggest proponent for us supporting this is Joanna, who's not here. So I'm just also throwing that out there. So I can know that she would be arguing the point that we have to do this for the reasons that are the reasons. So,
Letter on the,
pardon?
the letter on the article.
Oh, it used to be, it's formerly known as H. So it's 34 in the current warrants, or in the final.
Why wasn't this brought forward through the contract review committee? Isn't this exactly the type of thing that CRC was set up for?
I assume it's because Mr. Weiner and his colleagues had a successful request from us in the town last year, right? And they
Yeah,
had the money they
okay.
looked
Yes.
So it's a political calculation, is my guess.
And as we've, I think, already discussed, there's another article, I don't remember the number, that I think is a request from Fairwinds.
Yeah, Fairwinds was 33, and they're actually withdrawing
They're
their
withdrawing
request.
it. They'll withdraw it on the
Because-
floor. They're not going to get the signatures to officially withdraw it, so everyone who signed it,
Okay.
but they are going to be withdrawing it. They
Let's-
found the funding. They found alternative funding to cover their request.
Well, that's
So,
sort of good news, because
grant
I
or
was just,
something?
I was just gonna argue, I think it's sort of a bad precedent, even though I may be sort of personally sympathetic to helping good organizations, I think it's a bad precedent for people to kind of go around the whole process and approach town meeting and look for, funding for their charity or their organization.
and that was the feedback we gave Fairwinds, both in the CRC when I was still the member, and in person when we had another meeting with them on the 16th of January. So, and that message was accepted, and they then found nearly all of the 128,000 they were looking for, and so they will cover the delta. So they're going to be on the day pulling the article. That's to that end, Libby, do we as FinCom have to rule, knowing that? Do we have to rule motion not to adopt?
I would do something like that.
Okay. So,
Yeah, and I think we should put a comment in, like, on the
yes,
sponsor's request.
on the
or something
sponsor's
like that.
request. Or would we rule take no action? Because that's what we did on the other sponsors, when other sponsors have asked us not to act on it.
Yeah, so those were things like zoning changes and
Correct.
sewer map, like, whereas they're asking for money and they don't want the money, I think we should say not to.
Okay, so can I have a motion on Article 33, appropriation, health and human services Fairwinds?
Move not to adopt, yeah.
Okay, a second? We
Actually,
got both.
Chris can vote on this one.
Yeah, I'm not technically recused on that, but I like the way it's been.
Okay, all in favor?
What do you need?
Aye.
So this is good, so if we don't talk about 34 for a little while, but we tell him that we're going to, then he has to stay sitting over there, just in case.
You wanna pick the other
Yeah.
ones you wanna talk about?
Yeah,
now, Susan?
exactly.
No, we have an audience, that's what, we're desperate for
Especially
audience.
if that sits right in the
Okay.
front row.
All right, let me make a note that we did motion, and then we'll add a comment to it. Okay. All right.
I'd be happy to speak a little bit on the ambulance transfer, if you'd like me to, but also,
Yes, please,
That'd be interesting.
as a representative.
please do, Chris.
Information is good.
Yes, we like that.
So, speaking as a representative for the hospital, I don't want to put words in Walter's mouth. You should have him come back. I don't think there was anything politically contrived about their approach. I think they didn't know any better in terms of my conversations with him. I also want to make sure we continue to make it clear this is not a hospital citizen article. This is brought forth by the co-chair of the Behavioral Health Task Force. And I do think there are sort of three components of it that make this pretty complicated if I were hypothetically in your shoes. One is understanding whether or not this should be a town-funded piece or not, and where that fits, and or whether, I know there's some people that think this should, because the hospital is sort of the last one in the chain of events that happens before this piece, gets looked at as a hospital issue, considering whether or not it's really more of an ambulance issue, which is not a business the hospital's in, I think is sort of where the discussion goes. And I've invited whoever wants to come by and meet with the Health and Human Services folks at the hospital, understand all the pieces of this, to understand kind of the role the hospital plays and the role the other pieces all play, then you should come by and do that. I think the second part that's complicated is the comment from last year that said it's a one and done kind of thing. Where does that leave us? I know I talked to David Worth a little bit about it. I think that was partially on assurances, or maybe that the Behavioral Health Task Force kind of naively thought it had another funding source and had kind of made assurances, we're not going to need this again because we have something lined up, but it's worth maybe investigating that a little bit. And then the third part is it coming out of free cash. And I know funding things multiple years out of free cash doesn't make sense. So I would say that if there's something the town, or that's the policy is not to do that, if this is something that the town wants to make a part of it going forward, then the right people should get in a room much earlier this year than what happened this year. I think part of what happened this year was there was a bunch of scrambling trying to find another source, and that didn't happen. And so that got us kind of late into the process. But there should be a conversation probably much earlier this year to talk about how to fund it going forward if there is interest in funding it through the town. So that's just the three things that occurred to me.
We have there's no legal obligation to transfer these patients to another facility. So if that's the hospital can't handle it.
There are contradicting legal problems. One legal issue: if we can't get an ambulance here, then after a certain amount of time, we have to let them go. Right? We have to release them. That being said, you can't ask the patient to pay because the patient is being held against their will at this point. If they are sectioned, it's really complicated. The real issue is, how do you get the ambulance to come and take them? Interestingly, this is such purely a Nantucket problem. On the Vineyard, the Oak Bluffs Fire Department does all this, and they do not just the behavioral health. They do the majority of their transfers. So the Vineyard actually uses MedFlight much less than we do because it's profitable in the aggregate for the Oak Bluffs Fire Department to do it just based on that difference in the ferry time. We're the only ones that have this issue.
It's section 12 only, Chris,
Yeah. Yes.
for these?
Well,
And it's up to
the ambulance
35 people this year.
The ambulance won't
Expected.
take them unless they're sectioned.
Okay.
It's a really complex topic, and in fact, I spent another hour on it this morning understanding those aspects. The ambulance won't put them in the ambulance unless they're sectioned because they can't have the patient get partway through the process and say, hey, we're going to get out now because there have been some really bad circumstances where it's happened. So the ambulance company won't put them in the ambulance unless they're sectioned. At that point, it's against the patient's will, or they can't leave against their will.
Okay. And I remember when Mr. Weiner came in to talk to us it was in December, I think, early on.
It was the first public hearing.
Yes, I think he said that there was 21 patients last year and potentially they're expecting 35 this year. Those numbers seem correct to you?
I think they had 35 this year.
Yeah, I don't think we asked for a step up in expectation. I think we looked at the number. I think he presented the number that we ended up actually taking this year. I think maybe that was.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
All right, so forgive me if I obviously don't remember. Why can't our ambulance system do it?
That's the other thing. So Oak Bluffs has two things. They're doing 2 trips a day in transports, so they're actually organized around it, and they have crews that's what they do, is they do off-island transports. Also, if they're away and something bad happens, I don't know, what's the term for it, where you call in someone from
Mutual aid.
They have mutual aid from 4 other towns. We have no mutual aid to help out, so the chief can't be without that. And then it is much more costly for us because you have much more of a risk of the teams being gone overnight.
I was just wondering, because aren't we getting some new ambulances this year?
They're replacements.
So what do you do with the old ones?
It's not the hardware that's the is largely the problem, it's the teams.
You need to have two people,
Yes,
and does one have to be law enforcement?
I don't believe so, no.
But they're specially fitted ambulances, correct? So they can't be hurt in the back while they're being restrained. They have to be restrained in the ambulance.
I think they probably all just have that capability.
Yeah, I mean, we can get other expertise. In certain cases, they actually can't be restrained unless they need to be restrained.
Okay.
It gets into a lot of legality.
So for me, the question comes to, not is this and forgive me, I came from a long meeting this morning, debating a relatively small amount of money that we're allocating at CRC. And we had to make some pretty tough choices. We had almost $1 million in requests. And thanks to a second appropriation from the town, second allocation, we had $650,000 to divvy between a lot of really good, worthy services. And this is, again, a worthy service, a need that needs to be met. But is it a town responsibility? And if it is, what gets cut to make this happen? If this isn't going to be a debt exclusion, and it's not the way it's written, it's not, up for discussion for this year, what is going to be cut to make this happen?
Well, you could start by looking at the fire department overtime budget. I mean, it's been $250 over for the past several years. This is half of that.
We should be looking at the fire department's overtime budget because they're spending more than their
No, they're spending half of what their budget is.
but-
We consistently over budget for that.
right. But we heard the chief in here on the Saturday meeting where he said that has been the case the last 3 years, but hasn't been the case most of the last 10 years.
Because they don't know about their retirements or something like that. I think you mentioned that as part of it.
Right.
Staff.
So Brian, if this was to pass at town meeting floor, where would you have to find the money for it?
I don't know,
Okay.
truthfully.
So
I mean,
Mr.
it would be-
Sordovik's extra math teacher for the middle school is out the window, I assume.
That was unsuccessfully, the motion was made on Wednesday and it was not supported, so.
Oh,
That-
I saw Dr. Elprey today and I asked him about it, and he
Yeah.
said it's not going through.
so it can't be him.
Won't be.
If it I don't know. Depending on how the article was, the motion by the proponent was worded on town meeting floor, I'd have to find it somehow, but I don't know how I would do it because if it was raise and appropriate or transfer from other revenues, it would be relatively cutting it close.
I'm just going to say this to say it, but it seems like we do have some, and more well-trained people that with the fire department. I'm shocked that they wouldn't want some like part-time money or after-hours money. Maybe just
Yeah,
can't.
but they have
work
to
that
go
way.
off island. It's like a whole day
Yeah, but they-
excursion. We
One
don't
of the
have-
other things that's really complicated this and makes it hard for off-island ambulances companies to bid on this is
Yeah.
we need them to come right away or else we lose the bed, right? So you sort of don't know, and then they find a bed for someone, and if they don't sort of drop everything and come right at that minute, that bed could go away, and then you're back to the same problem again.
Right.
And so doesn't answer your question, but it's just another one of the complexities that makes it hard for anybody to kind of retrofit it as a system.
It just seems like we have people here who could do it. I guess maybe they don't have the time to do it.
Is it something that could be a business? I mean, potentially for somebody.
For a firefighter.
Not even.
Who's a
it's not
trained
even 1
paramedic.
week.
There's no money.
Yeah,
There's no money in it for them.
Firefighters go out for a day or more, now they have to be backfilled at overtime rates or more,
Yeah.
depending on the day, it could be a holiday. So, and a lot of times these things happen on holidays or after hours, so.
And it would have come up earlier, but maybe there's no reimbursement for this because the insurance companies and Mass Health will only pay when the wheels on the ambulance are rolling, and they're spending the bulk of their time with the wheels not rolling. It's a uniquely Nantucket problem.
Because there's 2 hours and 15 minutes on the ferry, so
They don't count that.
no, they don't.
That's weird.
It's So a little back to what Steve said earlier, what are we going to cut in order to do this? Could it be funded by free cash again? I guess, even though we don't think that's a good idea and it goes against our financial policy. Do we have more levy limit that we haven't cut into yet for fiscal 21? Yes, hardly any, but yes, and now our cushion that we really need for potential economic downturn coming up, the island home we don't know, solid waste we don't know yet for the current fiscal year, that now something happens, now we're cutting into that. So where are we gonna cut from?
I mean, I think we're at a place where unless the select board wants to decide to either increase the CRC budget so that you can.
Again, they did that 2 weeks ago.
You know, and take care of more charities. And, you know, you could come up with a great argument where this is unique to Nantucket, it's Nantucket citizen. I mean, you could come up with a compelling argument that the town should fund this, but.
But it should have been in my meeting this morning at the CRC to say, okay, who gets cut here? And frankly, it was a frustrating meeting this morning. Nobody wanted to cut anything. Like, everything is the most important use of money. And it's just not. Not everything can be the most important.
So what do? You have this patient, he has to get over there, has no money. What do we do?
I think this group has to, I mean, kind of what we told them last year. I mean, you have to come up with other sources of, I mean, do a cake sale. I don't care. I mean, you have to find some money. And it's not the town's responsibility, at least as everything's
But
currently
if
set
there is no
up.
money, is it the town's responsibility? If this guy is stuck here and needs to get to a hospital on the mainland, do we have any sort of legal responsibility to get this person there?
The town does not know, but Chris is raising an interesting, issue that we would face if the hospital had to let the person go, and then what happens? The liability, I don't think, would be on the town. We are hoping that there is going to be some funds coming in from the marijuana tax, and we have an article a little bit later on that would allow for increased usage of those funds, incorporate mental health into it, not just substance abuse. So I think we're thinking that we had on our end anyway, that is, if we had to fund this again for another year, I suppose we would use free cash. But really encourage the continued exploration of other funding sources. Are there grants out there that haven't been tapped into yet? Is there potential funds from partners, a gigantic organization that makes a lot of money? In the meantime, hopefully this marijuana tax will come in and maybe we can use that. I don't think we know really how much we're gonna be getting. Early estimates were, quite a bit, but we haven't seen that yet. But again, we've only got one place open, hasn't even been open for a year yet, and the other place isn't even open yet.
Do we have any idea what how the revenues are in the store that's open?
I think the first quarter was, but it wasn't a complete quarter, or was it?
Well, I don't know what the revenues at the store were, but the first payment that we received from the state, which flows to us, was for just over $22,000 for a 3-month period from when they opened in, I think, September is when they opened. So, I mean, marijuana is probably at least a year away from really understanding, having the ability to actually predictably understand what it looks like, because we don't have both facilities open. We haven't really hit the time when utilization will be different than it was in this 3-month period. So,
I mean, I think there's lots of worthy causes, and this is a worthy cause, but there's also no money in the piggy bank. So I move not, I make a motion
I
not.
just don't know what you do if a patient, if we can't get this patient somewhere.
Yeah, it's an extreme situation.
But I agree with you. I mean, it's not really our responsibility.
I'll make a motion not to adopt.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay,
Joanna.
Yeah.
in absentia, okay. Thank you.
That's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Chris, you did a good job.
It's a really tough one. Okay, skipping along.
Well, on that one, Denise, will you say something at town meeting about that one?
Yes, I think we need a comment on that one to say, to reflect that this was very difficult, obviously, that we understand the need, and we also understand that there is not town funding available for it.
Well,
That,
there's town funding available for a Health and Human Services Department. It's got $1 million budget, and then the Contract Review Committee doles out an additional $650,000 a year.
correct, that's what I was gonna
Yeah,
add
I was
to
just
it.
hoping to
Yeah,
talk
that-
about the
all of
process.
that's a significant commitment for a community our size.
Yes, I was gonna add that was going to,
I'm sorry to cut you off.
no, I was going to try to put it in it's not that Nantucket is not sympathetic to the requirements of these issues, and that there was $650,000 available this year. As you say, there's a Health and Human Services Department, and we would encourage them strongly to continue the hard work that they're doing now to find alternative funding. And if they want to re-present it next year, it should go through the CRC.
You did think, you guys were applying for a grant at one point, right? Or there were some grants that were being looked into. Sorry, weren't there some grant? Yeah, sorry,
Chris
Chris.
has to get on the other side of the table.
You're asking if the hospital was applying for grants?
Yeah, or,
No, of the Behavioral Health Task Force.
yeah, the task force or,
Yeah, and
remember we talked about the grant where you could like,
we were able to do better with the state. I mean, part of the problem, grants can be tough, and one of the things we run into often is if it's a unique Nantucket situation, it's
Yeah.
hard to find a grant out there because no one else has envisioned the problem. And you can try to stretch their boundaries of what their grant is for. You can try to find, like you had suggested, and I've already spent some time looking on the opioid side, but
Yep.
but it's really not a good fit for this. It's probably a good fit for some other things. I turned Dr. Lepre onto it,
Yeah.
and that should be a really good fit for him, so I appreciate that.
okay.
But, and that's where just the kind of the hospital helping out. Where the hospital spend most of our time is trying to lobby Mass Health to pay for it.
Yeah.
And we've been unsuccessful. So we've been trying to exert political pressure on Mass Health to step up and pay for it with no luck. Behavioral Health Task Force, it's a group of well-meaning people that come together.
Yeah.
Their effectiveness on kind of independently raising funds.
Yeah.
Understood.
Is that it?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Okay, so 39 through 62 are all zoning, and as I said, Andrew Vorse will be here on tomorrow, and he also sent us the preliminary report on how far they've gotten on some of their motions, so he'll take us through those, so we should be able to get through a chunk of those. Interestingly, I went through it and I emailed it to you. Leslie sent it to me today. All the ones that I was interested to see what they were going to come in and say at, they're going to still do later this week or in
I know, I
February.
saw that.
I was all interested to see how did they rule on certain ones, and they haven't yet. Oh, shucks, we still have to wait.
Just the boring one.
We still have to wait for the good part to come. Let's see, Andy Lowell's coming in on Thursday. Chris will discuss the town meeting vote on paid parking on Thursday with John here, John Giorgio.
Yeah, I'll
So,
try. I still haven't been able to get in touch with the moderator, so I'm a little bit stuck.
okay, but let's see where we go. Teresa Williams, thank you, Brian.
Well, I reached out to her and I actually got a hold of her and attempted to talk to her today.
Okay,
And the connection was bad and she said, I'll call you right back. And I never heard from her.
okay,
So I'm going to try again tomorrow because I actually, when she didn't call, I was in the middle, got into something else and wasn't able to get back to her. But she never called me back after taking my phone number. So
so the instructions the request to Brian was to ask Teresa if she had anything new since last year, because I word for word compared last year's motion to this year's motion, and they're word for word the same. So unless there was brand new information that we should consider, I don't see us spending a lot of time on it this year. And in the spirit of trying to
We've
let,
come so far, though. We had a I mean, if we've already called and asked for input, let's just wait another day and see if there's some.
I'll reach out again tomorrow to try to.
I was fine voting on it 2 weeks ago, but now that we've made the effort, let's not
okay,
vote.
all right.
Okay.
But let's do this, maybe by Thursday, if if it doesn't work, then we can just go ahead. But again, we can also do it on March 2nd in 2 seconds. So, all right, okay. 69, Julia's coming tomorrow. 73, Mr. Mandel's, formerly known as JJ for you, Peter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good job, Denise.
The select board has put in 72, their own bylaw amendment on single-use plastics. Mr. Mandel has asked me in an email to motion for the FinCom to take no action because he is happy to live with the amendments that came through on the select board's motion.
So take no action on his, but support.
Take no
the
action on his, but support the select board. And we'll discuss the select boards as and when we get to it. But on his, he's respectfully requested take no action as a ruling from Finance Committee.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Boy, we're moving right along here. The capital projects one.
Yep.
Campbell Sutton. Are we ready to vote on that one?
Yep.
After what we've heard?
No, move not to adopt.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Boy,
Yeah, every year everybody gets an extra eye. Okay, that'll be a fun email to read. Okay, all the rest, I think we have to wait until, yep. We can't, that's it on the citizens ones that we can rule on at this point. Any other business? No? Motion to adjourn? I can't make it, somebody,
I make a motion to adjourn.
thank you. Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Nope.
On that, I'm sorry, I keep going back to this, but the groundwater sampling.
Still pushing the
at the
weight.
airport, is that mandated?
What's that?
We're still pushing about.